Hello, my name is Dr. Chris Heeb, the Debt Doctor, and I welcome you to the Debt Doctor 911 podcast, where each week I, along with my dear friend and financial expert Richard Schaffer, will shift your focus from living paycheck to paycheck to a more solution-based process that will ultimately revolutionize your overall financial health. We will expose the hidden secrets about our financial system that banks and lenders never tell you about when it comes to getting rid of your debt and building your wealth. So make sure to listen every Thursday as we resuscitate your financial health and keep the lenders from flatlining your financial goals. All here on Debt Doctor 911. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Debt Doctor 911. My name is Dr. Chris Heeb, known as the Debt Doctor. And with me today, as always, on a weekly basis, I have my good friend and financial expert, Richard Schaffer. Richard, how are you today, my friend?
I am actually doing great today, Chris. It's really nice to be on the show today, man. It's been a minute.
That's right. We have had some really good episodes in the past. Matter of fact, our last episode, we had a real estate guru by the name of Justin Ford, and he brought a lot of insight into not only the importance of paying off your mortgage, but also the importance of building wealth at the same time. He had quite a story, Richard, don't you think?
Oh, he was fantastic. I enjoyed that thoroughly. He's just a really extraordinary person. I can't wait to hopefully be able to get him on again sometime in the future, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? That kind of segues into our topic for today, because we're going to discuss the unfortunate looming crisis that I think our listeners need to be aware of. And that's doing in the housing market, specifically mortgages, foreclosures. Um, a crash in the housing market seemed inevitable during the early weeks of the COVID-19, what we call recession. But that bust didn't come to fruition, Richard. In fact, the opposite happened. A combination of government support, recession-induced low interest rates, and eager home buyers set off a housing boom. And do you know that since the onset of this crisis, the median home prices are up a staggering 24%? Is that insane?
It really is. Those statistics are a little skewed just relative to the higher level kind of factoring into that mix. But yeah, it's significantly higher across the board, no matter what.
Yeah, and I was looking at some of the government programs that have been out there since the pandemic, and that government aid and support is going away. I mean, we know that the foreclosure moratorium, which prevented foreclosures of federally backed mortgages, came to an end July 31st. And we know that soon here on September 30th, the mortgage forbearance program, which allows some borrowers to pause their payments, that's going to lapse. So we got a lot of things, on the horizon here that people need to be aware of, especially if you have a mortgage, and more importantly, if you have been on forbearance. How is that going to affect you financially? And what kind of game plan do you have?
I think that's really true. I'm been talking to a lot of folks, having spent a lot of years in the mortgage business, Chris, as you know, and I've been getting a lot of friends of mine that have been beginning to reach out to me and ask those very questions. And it's definitely something that people need to start thinking about very, very soon. As you mentioned, there was a lot of relief that was made available to people, and that certainly was very important and needed by a lot of people. But now that we see the end of the moratorium on evictions and foreclosures and so forth, the government has rolled out some relief in some of those areas. We can certainly talk a little bit about that today too, if you'd like.
Yeah, I would like to, because, we have to, I mean, everyone is aware of the foreclosure crisis following the 2008 housing crash. Okay. And obviously we know how bad that was. Tens of millions of financially strained homeowners were underwater. And that's just simply meaning a borrower's remaining mortgage balance is greater than the home's value. And they really had no other choice but to foreclose on their home. In this particular situation now, that may be unlikely because the financially strapped homeowners, some of them are sitting on sizable, home equity. So there might be a huge sell-off. I mean, there might be a lot of people. I mean, I know in our area in the Midwest, people are putting their houses up for sale because they're taking advantage of these crazy high prices, and obviously they're taking their gains. But what do you see, Richard, potentially happening down the road here that our listeners need to be aware of?
No, I definitely consult with a lot of folks in my space that have a lot of respect for over the years, Chris. And the opinions are widely varied. I will tell you, it probably as varied as they are about what's going on medically and politically and otherwise. And there's a couple different schools of thought. But first, I don't know, and I won't say anybody, but or nobody, but the general consensus is we're not necessarily headed for this apocalyptic crash as we had obviously many years ago. 15 years ago. And there's some various reasons for that. But, one in particular, as you mentioned, is that people are standing in a much stronger equity position than they were in the past. Now, that could shift. But as you mentioned, values have had a pretty long runway over the last decade. But what you're going to begin to see, though, and I do fear this, and we talked about this a little bit, I believe, Chris, last week or the week before, is that inflation is a major factor. It's a big Y factor because we don't know how significantly that is going to begin to take hold nationwide and how long it's going to last and how much. But the other factor is, we're going to see kind of like a collection of, I guess, if you will, for lack of a better expression, a perfect storm. The government has announced that they're going to stop buying back bonds, and the average person doesn't need to really understand exactly what that means. But that indirectly helps to subsidize or artificially repress rates. So it makes things much more affordable. Well, the minute they stop doing that, that will help accelerate, if you will, the increase of mortgage rates a good bit, Chris. Inflation, obviously, we already know is a factor. Regulation, we see is going to be tightened up in a lot of areas, which may be a necessary evil, but that's going to have an impact on affordability and financing options and so forth as well. But you're also seeing this, as you talked about perfectly and kind of queued this up. They lift this moratorium on foreclosures and evictions. Well, what ends up happening is a lot of these folks probably will take advantage of selling, but that's going to create a much larger inventory on the market. And because of that, it will shift pretty quickly within 3, 4, 5, 6 months from being a seller's market to more of a buyer's market. And that will obviously drop values to a large degree there too. And I think the other unknown is you're getting a lot of folks that they're getting out of these programs the government has provided for them, Chris. And now, they became, if you will, a little comfortable with that, maybe getting PPP or subsidy or stimulus money or additional unemployment, et cetera. And now all of a sudden you kind of get acclimated to that. People don't necessarily plan ahead as well as they should have, or they would have liked to have. And then they start leaning upon debt. So then they start building debt, which now, of course, creates even more of a burden, as we talk about all the time, on the average family's finances and makes their ability to afford purchasing even less. So I think we're headed for a number of different things. Now, any one or two of those, Chris, would have an effect. They would have an impact, no question. But when you add 4 or 5 of them that I think you'll see all beginning to come to fruition in the next 6 months, that's going to lead to a lot of unique challenges and why people need to start really, really planning ahead right now.
I absolutely agree with you. Your reference to a perfect storm is what concerns me the most because think of it this way: you have our government adding these additional layers of protection for homeowners facing foreclosure, putting these different types of programs into place to extend payments for mortgages, and then you have the other element, obviously, with inflation. But then I think the biggest concern is, most homeowners become lazy, or maybe I should say they redistribute the monies that they were paying towards their mortgage, i.e., they're not making their mortgage payments, and they become comfortable and they shift those monies to different things. Okay. And like you said, this is a perfect storm. And, I've spoken to many people over the past few weeks that have looked into our financial tool. And I have noticed that when we do their analysis, they say, "Well, I'm not paying my mortgage right now."
Mm-hmm.
And even by not paying their mortgage, and they're still underwater. And that's what's concerning, is that they haven't even taken into consideration that they're going to have to start paying their mortgage payments again. And
Mm-hmm.
when they do, are they financially able to do that? Now, granted, a lot of them are back to work. They may not be in their workplace. A lot of them are working from home. They're still getting income, but the concern is, the shift in the distribution of discretionary income and where it is going. I mean, look, we are creatures of habit, right? I mean, there's a certain point when we do certain things on a regular, consistent basis, and it becomes happenstance. And all of a sudden, they're going to be faced with this dilemma. And what's interesting is that the government can only help us so much. Okay, I'm reading now. There was an article from the U.S. Government Accountability Office that said the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I didn't even know that was even an entity. Has announced an additional protection for homeowners facing foreclosure. This addition intends to limit foreclosures through January 1st, 2022, by adding conditions for servicers that must be met before a foreclosure can be initiated on properties with mortgages that become delinquent during the pandemic. So look, there's only so much government influence, and this can't last forever. I mean,
No.
again, this is that, the building built with cards, right? Okay. Eventually, there's going to be a wind. That perfect storm is going to come along, and then everything's going to fall apart. And where are you going to be financially? And I think that's the biggest thing, Richard, in this entire, crazy environment we live in, is that eventually, the storm is going to hit, and you're going to have to ask that serious question. Are you ready? Do you have a game plan? I'll give you my personal opinion of all of this is very simple. My wife and I are doing everything we can to eliminate our debt. I mean, it is like, before it was like, well, maybe I want to do this, maybe I don't want to do this. No, it is like, we are going to do this, and it's going to happen, and we're going to do it as quickly as possible. So, our listeners need to recognize that there is a perfect storm coming. We need to, they need to have a game plan. And I can't emphasize more the importance of seriously looking at our financial tool. And on that note, Richard, we're going to take a break and come back. And I know you have some great insight on call to actions, things that people can do right now, okay, to set the stage for a perfect or for a better foundation when it comes to their finances. So everyone stay tuned. We'll be right back. These days, American consumers are struggling just to keep pace with rising prices for basic staples. Are you stressed that you live paycheck to paycheck? Are you frustrated that you cannot seem to get ahead, always backing yourself into a financial corner? Are you hopeless that your financial predicament will never improve and you are just going to have to live with it forever? Recognizing that you need to do something about your debts is an important first step on your road to financial independence. Whether your debt problems have become a pressing emergency or you're ready to start that journey to financial freedom, you have a plausible option at your disposal. It's called the Money Max account, a financial tool that will transform your financial life. Denise says this is the best debt reduction system we have ever seen. We reduced our mortgage payoff date from 27.5 years to 8.3 years. Here's how you get started. Write this down. Go to moneymaxnow.com. Schedule your free payoff analysis to find out your exact debt-free date, how much you are going to save, and what wealth you could build for your future. It's free, and there's no obligation whatsoever. That's moneymaxnow.com. moneymaxnow.com. Now is the time to start that journey to completely eliminate your debt and start building your wealth. Go to moneymaxnow.com to schedule your free payoff analysis. That's moneymaxnow.com. Welcome back to Debt Doctor 911 with your host, me, Dr. Chris Heeb, the Debt Doctor, and also my good friend, Richard Schaffer, financial expert and guru. Richard, we were talking about on our last segment about, the looming perfect storm that's coming in regards to mortgages and foreclosures. And I think all of our listeners need to recognize this is a serious thing. We really need to take a serious look at this because we're noticing now in our economy with inflation. I'll give you an example. Imagine if you went to a gas station, you filled your gas tank up, and it cost you maybe $30 to do that. Okay. But you went to pay your bill, and the gas attendant said that'll be $90. And you say to yourself, hold on a second. I just put $30 worth of gas in my car, and you're telling me it's actually 3 times more than what I should pay you? That's $90. Are you kidding me? How many times would you go back to that gas station to get gas?
Never.
I mean, never, right? Okay. And it's the same thing with maybe if you went to the grocery store and you spent $100 worth of your hard-earned money on your groceries, but they said no, it's $300. How many times did you go to that grocery store?
Hmm.
I never go there ever. Okay. Um, that's what is going on right now in regards to your mortgage. Okay. We talk about interest rates and interest volume. We've talked about this in previous podcasts. People need to wake up and recognize that, whatever debt they have, it is costing them a heck of a lot more based upon the principal they pay down. And, when you have this perfect storm looming and you have, only so much the government can do when it comes to handouts and assistance, and then you see inflation, okay, the cost of goods going through the roof, the cost of living going through the roof. And, my wife talked about this a couple of weeks ago. She was mentioning, and she works as a court reporter and how she was getting paid. And she recognized that over the past 7 to 10 years, she basically has been paid the same amount per page when it comes to court reporting. And I thought, man, that is so out of balance when it comes to, living expenses and the rate of living. I told her, honey, I think you need to have a conversation with your boss because I think you need a raise. Okay. Because the numbers aren't matching here in regards to, each and every year as we go along here, the cost of living increases. Okay. So you would think that she should get paid more money now than she did a few years ago. And a lot of people, obviously working in our economy would expect, a certain amount of percentage of raise, okay, to keep up with the cost of living as we go along here in our lives. But look, people, this is becoming real and you need to wake up. Um, I've told Richard before, I said, look, and you've heard on our show many times, if you are curious to know where you stand financially, I would highly recommend you go to moneymaxnow.com and take a look at what our program could do for you and get a free analysis. I mean, it costs you nothing to find out exactly where you are currently and where you could be in the future when it comes to financial stability. But I know, Richard, let's talk about some solutions. Okay, some things that people can do right now. Listeners can actually take and utilize and start doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And as a bridge from the topic we had before the break, and probably as we start heading towards the wrap up here, you know, as you said, a lot of this forbearance and so forth is coming to an end, and so a lot of people are giving options for various types of modifications. One of them is called a flex modification, and the reason I bring that up, and I think that's a very expedited, very streamlined option for a lot of people. They don't have to provide a lot of documents; they just have to have been affected during the pandemic, but that interest rate is low. It's right around 3%, give or take. But they do it over a 40-year amortization schedule, Chris. Now, obviously, if that's, a necessary step someone needs to take advantage of to keep their home, of course, take full advantage of it. But go into it eyes wide open, because as you and I have talked about so many times on this show, it's not so much about interest rate, right? It's interest volume. It's the total amount of interest percentage you're paying relative to your payment. So if you think that that is very front end loaded on a 30-year mortgage, imagine how much more so that applies to a 40. So will it make the payment less? Yes, but you're not paying about 50% more in interest than even on a 30-year. It's really significant. But one of the things that you brought up, and I was thinking a lot about this just recently. You're a golfer, you're a great golfer, Chris. And I think about my dad had quoted this to me many years ago. And, as a kid, I guess you just don't pay as much attention to things as you get older and you realize how wise your parents were. But Jack Nicklaus used to have a great expression. And they said, we did an article in Golf Digest or something many years ago. They said, what do you think made you one of the greatest? And, he was a humble guy. He said, I don't know that I am one of the greatest, but, I appreciate you saying that. He said, but I did one thing consistently. Every single year, I went back to basics. And it reminds me of Vince Lombardi. He used to tell his players, this is a football. And he's saying that to people who have been playing football their whole life. But he said,
Right.
this is a football. Our goal is to get this ball across that line more times than the other team. And sometimes we make things complicated. And when it comes to life, what's going on around the world, all the crazy politics and all the things that are going on around the world and all these things that are happening, it's really easy, Chris, to lose sight of the basics, right? And one of the things that we stand behind a lot is not just helping people understand money. I'm big on education about money. That. That's been a passion for me my whole life. But it's taking that education and putting it to work, right? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. It's all theory until you actually take action. And, there's no better example of that than when you're planning on taking a trip. It's just a concept until you buy the ticket. And then all of a sudden you start making plans. And I think that we have to take the same approach financially. I think that it's time to really simplify. I think that it's a time to purge a lot of things that aren't really important to us, that we don't really need. I know nobody loves to do it, but go through your budget. As simple as it sounds, go through your last 3 months bank statements. Just look at the things you've spent money on. You don't even have to go through every receipt you've spent, literally just go through the last 3, 4, 5, 6 months of your bank statements and say, this is what I spent on gas. This is what I spent on going out to eat. This is what I spent on entertainment. This is what I spent on going to Starbucks or whatever it may be. And you'd be amazed how you could start finding ways that you can trim $200, $300, $400, $500 a month very easily out of your budget. Look at how many things you subscribe to you don't even use anymore. Small amounts of money. One of the most powerful things that we teach, Chris, and our system helps people learn is the long-term effects of small dollars. We all think it takes money to make money, and we've all bought into that mentality. But it's the small amounts of money compounded over a long period of time that makes a massive impact. So I think getting back to basics, focusing on how we can budget a little bit more efficiently, be better stewards of our money, and getting out of debt. Debt is ultimately a slave. It's like carrying that ball and chain. And no matter where you go, you can't be free because you're tied to that debt. Start developing an emergency fund, and not 2 or 3 months, maybe 4, 5, 6 months, right? Where you really know, and not a side account, savings account, a legitimate emergency fund that is for emergencies. But if you don't get yourself out of debt, you're going to find yourself in a lot more emergencies. And then, of course, ultimately, develop a long-term strategy. We're going to talk more about that in future calls, where you can do things out of the box and use what are otherwise known sorts of products that can be manipulated in such a way where they create great savings, access, the ability to borrow against them, and of course, stability and security, especially in what could be a very volatile market in the future.
Yeah, that's great advice, Richard. I think our listeners need to take all that to heart. And here's another thing to consider too. Over the past, I'm always amazed. Not only am I a passionate golfer, okay, and you seem like, here's kind of a funny story. For 20 something years, I had the same set of golf clubs. Okay, and this would be probably a great parallel story to um, washing your clothes. Okay. I mean, could you imagine, slamming your clothes on a rock or a washboard? Okay. No, you wouldn't, because technology, okay, in that aspect of life, okay, is obviously stepped up, right? I mean, we're using, high efficiency, washing machines. Um, we're not going to go back to the days of, hanging your clothes on a line in the backyard. Now, I know some people may, okay, but the majority of people don't, okay. And that's in the analogy of, of my golf clubs. I asked a golf pro one day, I said, hey, you know what? Do you think it's time for me to get a new set of golf clubs? And he asked me, well, how old are they? I said, I think they're about 20, 25 years old. He looked at me and said, are you out of your mind? He goes, absolutely. You need to get a new set of golf clubs. It would add 20 to 30 yards of distance to every single of shot that you have. He says, he said, Chris, technology has improved the golf club, okay, over the years. Why would you not want
Hmm.
to take advantage of a new technology? And that's my whole point of this is that, you know, why not take a look at the new technology, especially in the financial industry, and realize that we have a viable financial tool that will do a lot of this work for you. Okay, so you don't have to, think about it. I speak with people every single day, and I do these analyses for these people all the time. One of the things I find fascinating is when it comes to paying down debt, they want to throw all kinds of money, we call extra principal payments, to their different debts, but they have no clue, no idea of, is it the right amount of money? Am I doing the right thing? And as a result, they literally deplete their discretionary income to the point that they are just barely scraping by. But what if you could actually know to the penny exactly what additional monies could be paid to debt and be able to do that on a consistent basis and not have to sit there and think, well, how much do I need to send here? How much do I need to send there? Is this really going to affect me at the end of the month? I mean, how much is that technology worth to you?
That's really powerful, Chris. I really agree with that. And, I'll kind of close my thoughts on this. I look back and, time, time waits for nobody, as we all know, and, you're a parent. I have a little girl and she just started middle school. And uh, it's funny because she's required to wear uniforms and she's having a fit about that. But you start realizing that if you think the last 3, 4, 5 years went fast, well, just hold on because the next 5 years is going to go a heck of a lot faster. And you got to start planning ahead. And I think sometimes we've created this negative stigma about budgeting and saving, and we just don't want to think about it. We want to live in the moment. It's not a net sum game. It's not this arduous process. We associate spending with pleasure and saving with pain, right? Just like we associate eating with pleasure and dieting with pain. But you'll find that the peace of mind and security that comes from knowing that you don't owe anybody any money anywhere is very freeing. And feeling like even if you don't have a degree of financial independence yet, financial security, but you know what? Don't be intimidated. This is my best message. Doesn't matter where you are, start from where you are. Start from where you are. And I think that's what really makes this particular kind of strategy so powerful. And like you said, get a free savings analysis done. See what it would look like for you. I think most people will be blown away that even with the dollars they have, what a massive and significant impact they can make, how freeing that could really be. So, don't think that it's this overwhelming, Mount Everest sort of, commitment. I think that small things can make a big difference. And I appreciate, you creating this platform, Chris, because there's just so many people that need this information and the opportunity to be able to just see that they've got a clear path in the future.
Absolutely, Richard. And on that note, we're going to go ahead and end our podcast for this week. Hey, listen, if you want to take a look at a payoff analysis for yourself, and it's no charge to you and your family, just go to moneymaxnow.com. That's moneymaxnow.com. Take a look at our website. And if you're interested, obviously enter your information and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Listen, everyone, don't forget to listen to our podcast, Debt Doctor 911. We are on all the major social platforms. We really hope we can, have your referrals. Let other people know about what we're doing. This is some powerful information. This is stuff that we need to hear now. Because look, the perfect storm is looming. You need to be financially secure. You need to have a game plan. And listen, on our next podcast, we're going to have a special guest, a financial advisor, and that advisor is going to talk about how powerful our financial tool is. They call it the missing piece of the puzzle when it comes to establishing a game plan to not only eliminate your debt, but also build wealth. So listen, everyone, have a wonderful week. We love you all. We appreciate everything that you do. And we love that you're listening to us. And don't forget, let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. Until next time, Richard, my good friend, we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you so much for listening to Debt Doctor 911. We hope that this episode has helped you transform the way you think, giving you new ideas, and provided you a new perspective on the desire to eliminate all of your debt and build wealth so you can get out there and create the financial freedom you and your family deserve. If you would like to know your exact payoff date and see what our program could do for you, just go to moneymaxnow.com to schedule your free payoff analysis. That's moneymaxnow.com. Our podcast is for informational purposes only. The purpose of this podcast is to provide you with helpful information on the subjects discussed. Careful attention has been paid to ensure the accuracy of the information, but we cannot assume responsibility for the validity or consequences of its use. As each individual situation is unique, we disclaim responsibility for any adverse effects that may result from the use or application of the information discussed on this podcast. Any use of the information from this podcast is the sole responsibility of the listener. Results will vary based on an individual personal financial situation. All time and interest saving examples on this podcast are strictly hypothetical. Individual time and interest savings amounts are subject to individual qualification. No financial advice or recommendations have been made as a part of this podcast. We encourage you to seek the advice of a financial professional. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a second to rate and review. Each review helps us help more people just like you make a difference in this world. Don't forget to take a screenshot, share it in your Instagram stories, and tag us at The Debt Doctor. That's TheDebtDr, and at FinPro Advisors. That's FinProAdvisors. Finally, always remember, let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. See you next week.